the Deputy Ambassador of Mashav, Ambassador Hall, and Adam, who has been communicating effectively with us. Thank you very much for coming. About 20 years ago, I listened to Ruben Duran, and he basically said that Jerusalem was a threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite when David bought it. And that Jerusalem seems to continue to live up to that purpose of being a threshing floor where God brings all of the different ideas of nations to thresh it in Jerusalem. Well, he spoke for 1 hour or so, but that's what I remember out of it, and it is still on my heart. This afternoon, we're talking about the Africa Agency, and my time is very, very short, 10 minutes, and I promise to set the example to keep to time. This is about the people taking ownership of their own development. It's a catalyst for the kingdom. And when we talk about the vision, we talk about the establishment of a Pan-African, pro-Israel, socio-cultural, socio-spiritual, and grassroots movement to facilitate holistic development towards the realization of the African dream. So 2 years ago, we listened to the Mashav. Ambassador Gil Askel was here, and we also listened to the Jewish Agency. Mr. Nathan Sharansky was here, and Daniela Moore also spoke with us. And we saw from most of those presentations what is missing in the development of Africa. That we have handed over our development entirely to our politicians, and that it should not be so. That the people should own the government and not the other way around. It should not be the government owning the people. And that the people should take initiative for their own development in partnership with the government. I understand that it is not right, in my own view, it is not right for Abuja to make a development plan for Ibadan. Ibadan people should know what they want. They should know, they should have their own development plan and they should own it. You know, Pretoria should not have development plan for Bishop. What are the people in Bishop doing? They're just sitting there waiting for both money and ideas to come from Pretoria. I believe that needs to be reversed. And it may interest you that in the pre-colonial Africa, people actually owned their communities. They didn't wait for a center to tell them what to do. They decided how they were going to develop, what is their priority, and who their partners are in development. And I believe that this is the way forward even in the future of Africa. So the Africa Agency is looking at community development, community transformation as part of nation building. That the people can take responsibility, they can organize their own resources, they can determine and set their own priorities so that village life does not cease in Africa. You remember the scripture in Judges chapter 5 where Deborah said, village life ceased. It ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. And we're asking the people who are here today, Africans at home, Africans in the diaspora, that village life must not cease in Africa. It must be beautiful. We cannot just have villages, we cannot just have cities and towns and, everything going up to the sky and many people live suspended between heaven and earth. We want to see the village being developed, and we want the people to own the development, development, educational development, social development of the village in which they live. And I want to say that Israel has become a model in modern nation building. Everything that you see around here as you tour has been built in 70 years. This is exemplary. Israel was colonized. Israel lost land. Israel lost most of their identity, but they've regained all of that. So Africans can no longer sit back and complain about colonialism. It is time to move forward to regain our identity and to rebuild our city. If the desert blossomed like a rose, we can draw inspiration from that to make every community where we come from to blossom like a rose. Unfortunately, if we don't do it, if the right people do not take the leadership to get that done, the wrong people will do it. So the Jewish Agency accounts for Jewish people globally and raise funds to bring them back home. And I ask Africans today, how many villages in Africa can say we know how many of our sons who are in the diaspora and we can mobilize them for the development of our community? At one time when the Nigerian ambassador was asked during the Liberian War whether they would send a plane to go and fetch the Liberians there as the United States and the other nations of the world has done. You know what the Nigerian ambassador said? He said, who did they tell when they were going there? And you see such level of irresponsibility, such things that should never have come out of a leader. And that describes for you the situation that Africa has found itself. So African communities in the diaspora can also be organized to benefit, to be partners in development back home. And I am glad that Ansel is here, and it tells me that many African Americans are now doing their DNA test, and they found out that God has kept the original records of where they come from in their DNA. So they know they are Akan, they know they are Yorubas, they know they are Igbos, and it is now time for us to connect with them and to tell them it is Africa's time. And we don't want to just invest in Lagos or Nairobi or Johannesburg. We want to invest in the villages. So the Africa Agency will seek to develop a culture of responsibility and stewardship among Africans as opposed to the culture of entitlement. What this means is the Africa Agency is not going to be just donating things to any village, but will mobilize the locality, the people there from home and diaspora to contribute towards their own development. If they need a well, they must raise a percentage of what it costs to sink that well, and then the Africa Agency will mobilize engineers, experts, skilled people who can go there and make that well a reality. So in closing, I want to read the book of Isaiah chapter 61 and from verse 1. It says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and the recovery of the sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. And I will encourage you to read that old scripture, Isaiah 61. But my submission is, our time has come. Kenako. And you who are here with us today are going to be champions of the development in your various community. I thank the Mashav for coming to our aid and to help us, and I look forward to what you are going to be sharing with us and how we can partner with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up on what Pastor Shegun has just done, talking about development of African community. And the first thing that I like to say there is that the quality or state of being of our people is determined by their mental and spiritual development and accomplishment, and not necessarily by age. And that has been graphically demonstrated by the history of Israel, like we just heard. The Israel returned to the land in 1948, and by what they have accomplished today, it just shows that a nation doesn't have to be 100 years, 200 years to be able to make strides. And therefore, I see this as a promise. I see this as a hope that what we're embarking upon, we don't have to wait for another 100 years to see it accomplished. All we need is the two things that are identified there, the mental capacity and the spiritual capacity combined together to drive what the Lord is showing to us. We have seen that done in Israel, and it's possible in our time. Again, the next point is Africa as a community's transformation from ancient traditions and truths to modern standards. Some people call it old technology. So far, that's where we have been. And the challenge before us today is this transformation to have the capacity and the ability to say, we need to transform and we need to change and we need to move from a tradition and to move away from old tools, archaic tools, and then move to what is available. I believe it is on this basis that we are partnering with the Israeli agency to become part of the global community that are leveraging on what is available today. I move on and I say that identifying and understanding African community. As I go on, I would like to say something. One of the things that we need to deal with is the fact that we have had colonialism in Africa that has truly changed our a lot about us Africans. My understanding of African community is that it should be a community that is responsible to one another, care for each other, hence the concept of extended family, and being their kings, kids and kings, keepers, to be taken seriously again. People like us, we grew to know African community different from what it is today. I can tell you that when I was growing up in African community, a woman will put his wear by the roadside. She doesn't have to be there. And everybody will be a seller. And you will sell for him or for her and keep the money. That has changed. So we grow to see African community that is together. But a lot of things has come to change that. And I do believe that that African community we know is an African community that we seek to restore in the sense that we are known to be our brother's keeper. As a result of the one above, African go extra mile to support and ensure that needs of communities are addressed. And that's why we're here. I feel also that for us as Africans, now that we are here at this platform and to cooperate and to connect with the Israeli agency, first and foremost, I believe that Africans must be partners. We cannot just ask outsiders to come and help us if we are not prepared to help ourselves. I believe that there needs to be cooperation between Nigeria, for instance, and Kenya, Uganda. We need that community, that coming together. And that's why, for me, I like to see more Africans coming to this forum, because it's going to be what many of us have to do. I must move on quickly because there's a lot to cover. I also want to say the challenge, community development challenges. I want to say, number one, challenge of leadership. That has been spoken here in this at this meeting. The challenge today is to raise new leadership. New leadership that is thinking differently, new leadership that is thinking corporately, together. It cannot be done by just few. It's going to be all of us, that we may be able to bring this community development together. As I will be speaking later, but I also want to say that leadership as we see today, it's been more of political leadership. I think that's what Pastor Shegun is also saying. Leadership that is determining things for us from the cities. But I'm looking at leadership that comes from the grassroots. You see also I'm going to do that. The other thing that is a problem to us in Africa is the issue of corruption. Corruption, again, I must say, corruption is where a lot of our resources have been embezzled, and we are finding ourselves here we are today. But I also must say that most of the corruption that we see in Africa today has come also from outside. Has come from outside. And then we need to address that. Has come from the political system, has come from outside, has come from the political, from the colonialism that's come into Africa. And therefore today, the next thing you see, number 3, is the challenge today is the poverty of food, poverty and food insecurity in our land has tended towards endemic collapse of the fabrics that hold the communities together. Lack of food, access to potable water, in dangerous and inimical to decent living and sustainable livelihood. These are the challenges in Africa today. The other challenges, is the injustice of the past and the present. What I mean by injustice of the past and the present is the injustice of colonialism, what it has done. But I'm not of those who will sit down and begin to wail and cry for what has done in the past. Inadequate finance, all the challenges we face in Africa, we know them, but I have to mention them. Then solution, what are the solutions? Well, I think in my mind, first solution to this violence is, again, leadership. We've heard the message today, the harvest of leadership. But I think proper leadership. Leadership that is focused, leadership that is selfless, leadership that is willing to make sacrifices. Nations are built by leaders who are willing to make sacrifices. Willing to make personal sacrifices to see the development of the nation. I believe that this is what the platform is all about, that to raise true leadership, like we heard in the morning, harvest of leadership. Leadership, everything stands or falls on leadership, if we have true leadership. And the cry of my heart is that such leadership will begin to be identified, like we heard in the morning, and to raise such leadership. I believe that's the cry of Africa. That's the cry of Africa. Oh, that the Lord, in His mercy, will be gracious to us, to raise for us true leadership. Secondly, partnership with decent and forthright partners will be helpful in advancing support the idea generating genuine development and community. Again, Africa has had people coming all over the world to help Africa. But what Africa needs today is people who are come with genuine sincerity to help Africa. I believe that's why we are connecting to Israeli agency, because we see them in their history and what they have done, that we can partner with them. And we can find that partnership that is coming with genuine interest to develop Africa. That's our need, as I believe that we can do it together. And I'm glad that they are here today, Israeli agency. I was talking with some Nigerian leadership, particularly Yoruba leadership recently, because as we are at the crossroad in Nigeria in many ways. And there's this idea that the Yorubas should break away from the Republic. And I was there, and I happened to be in that meeting with leaders of thought, leaders of community in Nigeria, and I said to them, we don't need to break away. There'll be too many problems if we decide to break away. We'll have to fight war. We have to go through a lot. And I said to them, instead of thinking of breaking away, why not consider the concept of Israeli agency that is bigger than government, that cater for every Israeli, and that if we can adopt that, even as a people, the Yoruba tribe occupy about 7 states in Nigeria, and I was saying to them, if we adopt the concept, and they were surprised, and they asked me, does it entail? Is there anything like that? And I did explain to them. And they were very open. And I was thinking, if we adopt that, instead of being confrontational, instead of seeking to divide the nation, we can then just cater for the Yoruba race. And I said, we then can extend it to Igbo race. Then we can extend it to other tribes. And before we know it, we would have been achieving what we could not achieve through political leadership. And I think that's the hope, that this thing may go through Africa. I hope that before I leave Jerusalem, I'm still going to talk to Pastor Segun. I'll be able to go with some documents that I'll be able to present to these Yoruba leaders for them to think and to look at it. And they said it's possible. So I do thank God for this opportunity. Before I take my place, I don't know how many minutes I have. I like to say the major need in our development, Pastor Segun has mentioned that, but I like to mention it, is the rural communities, the villages, the towns. That's where you see so much suffering in Africa. You can come to our city and you can see tall buildings and all that, but the rural community is badly in disrepair. And if there's anything that is going to drive communities in Africa, that will change Africa and transform Africa, it must start from our rural communities. That's where people are suffering. Majority of our people are living in rural communities. And I do hope that what the Lord is putting in our heart today, what God is placing in our hand today, will be something that will start very soon. We can't wait for too long. And I believe it's something that doesn't have to take many years to bring forth fruits. That's why I said at the beginning that it's not how many years. It's not how many years. But people are ready, mentally alert, spiritually alert, who are ready to work, will be the instrument that will drive what is being given to us. Thank you very much for this.